Okay, welcome to our latest live stream. Our subject today is frugal entrepreneurship. My name is Mike Boyle. Glad that you are able to go ahead and join us today. Located in Vienna, where the weather has been quite interesting here. We currently have sunshine, but very possibly in about 10 minutes time, we will have snow. And so my wife keeps telling me that's normal for this area in April, but to be honest, I cannot remember the last time that we actually had snow at this time of the year. I guess we should be thankful for having normal weather, but I know it's just a fad. We have a wonderful cast of participants today, so let me go ahead and give you a brief description of who we have in store. We'll be starting with Patrick Schroeder, who is a senior research fellow at Chatham House, and then we'll move on to Aarti Shah, who is the director at the Cobalt Partners. Nii Simmons is an emerging markets professional based in Ghana. And we'll be closing it with Thomas Talhelm, who is an assistant professor at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business. And our concentration will be on the idea of frugal startup founder. So, yeah, first of all, let's go ahead and get started with you. Patrick, I need to go ahead and unmute you. That should work. No, it doesn't. Unmute. Yes, now it works. Okay, excellent. So, Patrick, first of all, thank you very much for joining today. Of course, the whole idea of meshing frugal and circularity, I know a little bit about the subject. I started off myself as a frugalista. In other words, I was very much ingrained in this idea of frugal innovation, and it was around 2016 where I actually went ahead and started realizing that there was something else out there, the circular economy, and that for me, it was a very strong bond between the two. And I'd be very curious to find out from your perspective, when did that click come between frugal innovation and circularity, and how did it take off from there?
Okay. Yeah, thanks for the questions, and thanks for the introduction and for inviting me to join. I'm a researcher at Chatham House, the Energy Environment Resource Program. I'm based in Brighton, actually, also very sunny here today, fortunately. And for me, it was the other way around. I was working in the area of circular economy and came across frugal innovations and frugal entrepreneurship through that work, especially through my work in a EU-funded development cooperation program with Asian countries, promoting sustainable consumption and production and circular economy solutions. And in this context, I realized there's a lot happening in terms of frugal innovation and entrepreneurship, especially in terms of in areas which not necessarily have heard of the circular economy as a concept. So although we see a lot of circular economy activity in Europe, we need to realize that the circular economy as a concept wasn't invented by Europeans or the global north. So there are a lot of circular practices taking place all over the world. And in our work, what we try to highlight is the contribution circular economy can make to the Sustainable Development Goals. And so there are many examples which in different sectors, not only the waste sector, so circular economy focusing traditionally on waste and resources, but it's also relevant for sustainable housing and construction. There are many good examples, sustainable sanitation, and increasingly the circular economy is also expanding into sustainable food systems. So we can see many approaches that are already well established. One area that I'm also interested in is how to understand or how to link frugal entrepreneurship and digitalization. So within the circular economy discussions, digitalization is considered one of the mega trends and closely related to circular economy and Industry 4.0 in the wider context. However, so we've seen, though, also in our work that we do in, for example, in Africa, looking at digital solutions to reduce plastic pollution and create circular plastics economies. There are many entrepreneurs who are using digital innovations to close the gap in terms of collection and recycling, and creating business models around these issues of mismanaged waste. Maybe one point before I stop, wanted to highlight, for countries or consumers in the global north, that concept of frugality is also key for creating circular societies. So within the circular economy, a lot of focus is on business opportunities and technology solutions, but it also requires the corresponding social and behavioral patterns that go along with that. So there's a lot we can learn as consumers from this frugality and frugal innovations approach, in terms of how to change the way we produce and consume.
Yes, of course, and I couldn't agree with you more. Maybe just for all of you who are watching us, if you have any questions, please feel free to go ahead and put them in the chat box, because we're looking for plenty of ammunition to go ahead and create a very exciting panel discussion. I have to tell you, Patrick, you couldn't have known this. You did a wonderful segue for Aarti, because you talked about two things that she specializes in. One is the question of technology, and of course, frugality in the global south. So I thank you in the name of Aarti, and perhaps if I can go ahead and send you back to our VIP room in the back, and then if I can bring you back out when it's ready for our panel discussion, that would be fantastic. Okay. And speak of the devil, greetings, Aarti. We have a small film, so let me go ahead and dig that one out. 1 second. And this is the first, folks, that we are going ahead and trying a film, and Aarti will go ahead and provide the voiceover.
Okay. So this is gasification. This is biomass undergoes gasification, which generates different forms of energy the electricity is stable, and could replace the batteries that make solar mini-grids so expensive in Africa. And if you flash dry tea prunings, and you generate heat to wither tea leaves. So gasification improves energy supply, and women who no longer have to collect wood will be more productive elsewhere. And if the same women for the first time are being paid for this residue that you were seeing earlier in the video, evidence indicates that income will be put to good use. Agribusinesses can use the capital saved to add value, but gasification to energy, while efficient, leaves a stable form of carbon known as biochar. And this biochar will increase crop productivity and capture carbon in the soil. And if we add crushed basalt rock, which we find easily in sub-Saharan Africa, we capture even more carbon and make productive use of it and help combat global climate change and soil acidification. In short, here's what you can expect for 100 tons of biomass, with all of the output going back to the communities, including the farms. Thank you.
Okay, as you might have all noticed, we are live because we couldn't have faked that one. Aarti, I apologize that we had some struggles in bringing you back on board, so I apologize for that. I apologize for all of you in the audience. Perhaps maybe if there's some of those components that didn't quite make it in the beginning, if you'd like to go ahead and briefly talk about some of these ideas, because they're very, very important.
Yeah, I think what's really important, I won't go into all the problems because I think those are well documented and talked about all the time. I think maybe one thing I will say is that solar in Africa isn't as cheap as people think it is once you start adding the batteries and inverters. But what we're really trying to do is take this agricultural waste, low-grade agricultural waste. So what we're talking about is nutshells or tea prunings, coffee prunings, sugarcane bagasse. So the things that you can't use as animal feed, you can't use as compost. And we're putting that through gasification, which is not incineration. It is actually low oxygen thermal conversion. And that generates different forms of energy. We talk a lot about electricity, there not being enough electricity in Africa, but in fact, we have an even bigger problem, industrial heat. So we're burning wood for industrial heat. So with these different types of energy, you can have continuous electricity, for example. You can replace batteries from solar mini-grids, bring down costs. You can flash dry tea prunings and use the heat from those tea prunings to wither the tea leaves instead of burning wood. And so, there are multiple interrelated benefits. But I think where it's really important as well, and where as a consortium, we are absolutely adamant, and you'll have seen a couple of slides of women being trained, and you'll have seen Samantha, who is our gender diversity guru. Women farmers in Africa, if you don't pull them out, or if you don't convince them to come and work with you, there will be all sorts of reasons why they won't, right? They'll be too busy and other people will be stopping them from coming out, et cetera, et cetera. So that it's really key for us to make sure that those women are trained on what sort of residue to provide and how to apply the biochar once every few years. I'll stop there.
Okay, no, wonderful. And perhaps you might have noticed that there were some postings coming through in the chat box. It's quite clear that you brought your fan club with you. And so I just wanted to go ahead and highlight some of those things. Aarti, thank you very much. And if I can have you go back to our VIP room in the back, and if you can join us when we're ready for our panel discussion, that would be very thankful. Wonderful. All right, excellent. Then without further ado, we'll move on to Nii Simmons. Nii, thank you very much for joining. I think it's very interesting when hearing your story that you immigrated to the United States, but you decided to go back to the country of your parents and try to make a go of it, and coming up with this concept of sustainability and startups in Ghana. Perhaps if you can talk to us a little bit about maybe that impetus, you going back to Ghana to get this started, and maybe some of your motivations?
Sure. Thank you, Mike. First of all, thank you for organizing this panel and bringing us thought leaders together in this very important and growing space. Just one correction, just to make sure that we're maybe I misread it or misheard it wrong. Um, I was born in the States. My parents were the ones that immigrated to the States. Um, I'm here. I've been in West Africa for 4 years, and before Ghana. I was in Cote d'Ivoire. So just to clear that up, I'm an American.
Okay, thank you.
My parents
Sorry,
are
apologies for that.
American, but they're no problem. Anyways, so my name's Nii Simmons. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are, or even good evening. I'm sure there's plenty of people who are watching this from different corners
Like
of
to
the
think
globe.
so, yeah.
In terms of, sure, yeah. So I'm sort of new in the whole circular economy discussion. Sustainability, I've been focused on that, at various points in my career. It wasn't until maybe I got involved with a European Commission funded project mid last year that I started to look at the space. Very interesting space is growing. I'm in touch with various private sector companies. Everybody's talking about sustainability. The fact that people are talking about that it's becoming a norm. We've actually had sustainability or circular economy in Africa for decades, years. It's just that we don't call it circular economy, right? Give you a good example is one of my sandals. It ripped last year, and if it was in the U.S., I would have just thrown it out. I mean, I walked to Target or an Amazon or something, but I said to myself, wow, I really need sandals. I don't like to always wear shoes, especially in this hot climate. So I just went down the road and I got it, within less than 45 minutes or so. I got a refurbished sandal, and all the guy did was put some glue. He put, so that's considered, in my viewpoint. We've been doing this circular economy for a while. People don't throw away things that they can reuse, right? So that's one good part. The bad part is single-use plastics. We need to figure out a way to stop the single-use plastics. And you can educate people all you want. We just need to come up with new innovations that can look at plant-based plastics, other type of plastics that people are going to use. I mean, in the third world, you can talk about circular economy to a local person that's only making less than $1 a day. It's not going to resonate with them. For them, they're looking at the basics. They want food. They want to make money so they can make food and care for their family. If you're going to try to talk about this abstract or this esoteric thing about circular economy, it's not going to resonate with them. So it really has to start from the industrial side, and we need to come up with new innovations that consumers are going to use, because consumers buy things they don't necessarily care in the third world where it comes from, as long as they solve their issue and makes their life easier, and it makes it easy. So that's what we have to do. So I'm very interested in this space. One of the things I'm trying to do, speaking about innovation, we have a lot of innovative research going on this continent. A lot of researchers, PhDs, who have actually, most PhDs on the continent, most of them get their degrees outside of Africa. Increasingly in the past 10, 15 years, a lot are going to China. So one of the things that we're looking to do is figure out how do we scale some of these innovations that are in these research labs that can solve Africa's challenges. That's one. Number two, how do we engage the diaspora to be a partner so that we can scale some of these innovations that could be a force multiplier, right? But also that can create indigenous African companies that can create jobs, STEM jobs, right? So that's where I'm coming from. The sky's the limit. I mentioned this. I mentioned this quite a bit. I spoke at a virtual forum last week, and the continent right now is 1.3 billion. In the next 20, 25 years, we're going to be over 2.1, 2.2 billion people. That's gonna, it's gonna be a strain on climate change, food security, and jobs. So this should be like a Marshall Plan for Africa. So that's what I'm focused on. I'm interested to get more thoughts and conversation around this. Thank you, Mike.
All right, thank you very much, Nii. And if I can ask you to go ahead and take a spot in our virtual VIP lounge, and I'll bring you back for the panel discussion. Thank you very much again. And our closer today would be Thomas. Thomas, thank you very much for joining, and you took yourself off mute, so I'm thankful for that. We met, it's 5 years ago now, when I saw your presentation and you described the story about your time in China, and you had a serious problem that you needed to solve. And now you've taken this idea and you've created a business out of it. And so I think it would be interesting certainly for me, and I think for the audience, to maybe talk a little bit about that path or that journey that you took and where it's taken you so far.
Yeah, so I happen to be a professor at a business school right now. And when I teach my MBA students, I tell them I started a business, but it's not why I was hired, and it's actually completely an accident. So I'm primarily a psychologist. I'm a cultural psychologist. I do lots of research in other countries. I've lived in China for roughly 7 years. And I was in China as a PhD student doing my research, and the air pollution got really bad. I was living in Beijing. People were calling it the air apocalypse, like the end of times, but for our lungs, really. And it was making me basically have like a cold, just constantly coughing. And so the first thing I did was I'd say, okay, well, I'll just go buy an air purifier. But then I found out the cheapest one cost basically $1,000 at that point. And so then I thought, that doesn't sound right. How do these things work? And so I looked into it. And by looked into it, I just mean went to Wikipedia. It's really not that hard to figure this out. It turns out air purifiers are really simple. The technology, it's been around for 70 years. They're just fiber filters made out of simple fibers and fans to push air through the filter. That's it. Because I was in China, I figured these were probably made in China. So I just bought a filter and I had a fan at home, and I just strapped them together, and that was my first purifier. I then went out and I just started, it just kind of mushroomed from there. So I bought a particle counter. It's like a tool that uses lasers to test for really small particles. So this way I could know that it was really capturing these small particles of pollution. And then I started publishing the data to show other people, like, hey, these don't need to cost $1,000. And then journalists started picking it up. And then I started hosting workshops where I show other people, I tell them about the data and I'd show them how to build them. And then eventually I realized that telling people how to build things is not always the same as actually getting them to use something. It's a big hurdle. So with a couple friends, we started just making them ourselves and shipping them directly to people. Just these simple DIY air purifiers, just a fan, filter strapped right on top of it. And then eventually, that was 9 years ago. Eventually we made like a finished product. So it's like a nice looking purifier. It's a lot easier to use. It's quieter. It's more powerful. That was 9 years ago. We've shipped over 50,000 of those simple DIY purifiers, lots more of these more beautiful purifiers that we have. We started in China, moved quickly to India. We're in the Philippines, Vietnam, Mongolia, basically anywhere where there's a need for clean air. We ship these low-cost, no-nonsense air purifiers. So we're basically about that, and also just about educating the market by putting out open data and tests to show people that these are not complicated, that most of the claims about new technologies or really fancy things are just tricks to get you to pay more money. Air purifiers are simple, they work, and they don't need to cost a lot of money.
And you proved the point that 90% of what we're dealing with is probably induced demand in some fashion. So I appreciate that one as well. Then I'm going to go ahead and set myself back to the virtual VIP room and bring everybody out. First of all, we'll start with Venkata and Peter. Perhaps if you can go ahead and unmute yourself, that'd be great. And I will continue with the rest of the crew. And I will say goodbye for the time being and leave it all to you.
Hey, thanks, Mike. I will start off. One of the most important things that I always see in the frugal innovation aspect is And I think Thomas with this, the social enterprise, Smart Air, and Nii, who has this where they want to scale up these African innovations and so on, and maybe the others as well, but especially these two. I want to pose a question to you regarding about scaling up of affordable solutions, because this has been one of the issues I see is scaling up of frugal innovations. Maybe you can give your thoughts on that.
Sure, I can talk a little bit about Smart Air. We have a really weird situation in that it started as a DIY solution. And so when we were scaling up, it was basically nothing, right? Because I built a purifier at home for $30, and then to ship these out to other people, it was just totally off the shelf, right? So we didn't need to make the fans, we didn't need to make the filters. It was all this, off the shelf thing. And then we'd sell 100 of them. We'd take that money and use it to buy 200. Now it's a little bit more complicated because 200 is a lot more expensive than the profits from 100. But we would just, cobble together a small amount of money from friends and family to do it. And then it just sort of, it sustained itself from there. The problem is that's not always possible, right? It's sometimes, for example, when we were building our new air purifier, the one that was a finished product, that is a lot more expensive because you need to make a mold, you need to contract with a factory to build X number of these before you can even get it off the ground. And so it can be really difficult. But if you can start at this simple DIY strap together, this is an immediate solution to your problem. Oftentimes that can get you in the door with a very, very low cost. If there's any advice I could give to people, because I know people's situations are different, I think I would try to encourage people to maybe start small or start simple and see if that works. I notice that even at Smart Air, we often try to think like, oh, we'll make this purifier and then it'll be like this and this and this, and we want to make it perfect and have these grand dreams. But I don't know, start small and test it in the market and see if people actually want it, and then move from there. Things don't have to be perfect from step one.
Yeah, thanks, Thomas. Nii, do you have any ideas on this? Hello, Nii. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Or Aarti
Okay.
and yeah. Okay. Yeah. I was just asking, do you have any thoughts on the topic about scaling up and affordability and like how they go well together or not? Are the issues, problems that arise?
I'm sorry, could you rephrase that question? It was coming in and out. I don't know if it's my internet connection, but could you?
So yeah, sorry, I was just thinking that your organization also talks about scaling up solutions, African solutions. So I was just wondering, frugal innovations and affordable solutions, they're having like less examples of them scaling up successfully so far. So I was just wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've been involved with various innovative progress or programs and projects, and I think one thing about innovation is you can't assume that what a consumer wants, right? I'm gonna in some ways I may contradict what I'm going to be saying, but in some cases the consumer doesn't know what he or she wants, but at the same time you also have to get buy-in from the consumer, right? Henry Ford and even Steve Jobs have always said, if I could paraphrase or quote, Henry Ford said, hey, when he came up in the Model T, he always said the Model T will always be black. That's what consumer wants. And then Steve Jobs, remember when the first iteration of the iPod came out, he said that the consumer doesn't need any more than two colors, right? But at the same time, when you're, the whole thing around design thinking is getting feedback from the community, local community, right? If you're gonna design a product that's made for a Western market, but you don't have the local community buy-in, then that project may not scale, right? I used to work at the World Bank Group and a few other multilateral institutions, and there are always these projects where you always wonder, you always wonder why some of these partners or these foundations, there's so many of these foundations that come to continent and they see, okay, there's this village, we think that they need fish, or they need this, and then it gets implemented, and you come back 3 or 4 years ago, you wonder why it's not sustainable, right? You can't assume that because a community doesn't have something, they may need it, right? It's very, very important that you look at innovative things that can scale. But that's why I always tell people, you gotta get the diaspora involved. You gotta get people from the African diaspora who understand the local market, but they also understand global context, right? So for me, that's just important. And the thing about innovation, by definition, when you're creating something, when you're innovating a product, it's something that's unique. It's unique. It solves an issue, and it improves upon a process, right? That's very, very important, right? And sometimes you could create something that's very innovative, but the user case for the whatever you're creating, make sure that it's not only sustainable, but if it needs to be fixed, you're training the local community that can fix it, right? Instead of flying in somebody from the West. So that's something that people should look at, I really, even some people who are doing human-centered design, they miss that, making sure that things that are implemented, you train local community and make sure that product or that service has the capacity or the ability to fix or service that product, right? So that's just very important. So that's my take on that. I mean, other people may have a different, but that's my take.
I'm happy to answer as well. I mean, I think what you saw from the presentation was that gasification itself can scale up or scale down, right? So you can have a flush dryer for tea leaves, which you can buy on the net. You can buy everything on the internet these days for $20,000. But it's not the technology per se. You can have a 25K kilowatt gasifier, 120 kilowatt gasifier. So in terms of scaling, yes, there's that. It can scale across different commodities. I talked a lot about tea, but we can talk about pineapples. When we talk about pineapples in Kenya, it's not necessarily individual farmers. You're now starting to talk about agribusinesses that you can go and talk to and say, look, right now, you need help remediating your waste. You're not, you're burning it, or you don't know what to do with it. We can help you. But I think what's really important is, in order for these very sort of local solutions not to become white elephants, is for the community to feel a sense of ownership. That could be ownership through a production cooperative, or it could be an ownership through having jobs at the generator site or through the transportation of the waste. But unless you have that, then guaranteed, as soon as you turn your back, that project will fail. So that sort of shareholder ownership is really key.
Okay, maybe I can come in with another type of question for the next round. And maybe I should then start with Patrick and then also ask the others to comment. When we prepared the seminar, we were thinking about 3 issues: circularity, frugal entrepreneurship, and equal opportunity. And I think it's the third one, equal opportunity or inclusion, that hasn't been touched much yet. So maybe we can push on that a little bit. And Patrick, at the end of his introduction, made a very interesting comment about the need for corresponding social and behavioral changes that also require changes in the way that we consume and produce. And that would apply to consumers in rich as well as in poor countries, but in different ways. On developing consumption and production patterns that would also be more inclusive. For the others, the question is also about how they see the issue of equal opportunity as part of the way in which they're running their social enterprises. I think Aarti mentioned very briefly the training of women that would otherwise not be included in the enterprise. But maybe Thomas and Nii can also say a little bit more about what they do. But perhaps Patrick can go first on the broader, more policy question about the inclusion of different kinds of consumers in the global north as well as the south.
Yeah, okay. Thanks for the question. It's a topic that we've tried to highlight as well. So generally in the circular economy discussions of the last few years, it's been remarked repeatedly that the social dimension hasn't yet received sufficient attention. Previously being focused on industry, technology, business opportunities or business models. However, this is also beginning to change. And in our work, we try to talk about an inclusive circular economy. And I think there are different elements to that. The first one maybe is about now the question about the opportunities, the circular opportunities. It's really a question about who will capture the value of this shift from the linear to a circular model. So we always try to highlight that now that we have very large established companies and big businesses who are trying to explore now the opportunities in the circular economy, we need to ensure that it's not, and this is very much a political question, that those who are already winning in the linear system will then also win even more through the circular economy. But we need to ensure that those benefits or the value that is captured is equally distributed or more equally distributed. And that also, we see there could be also the risk that many people working in the circular economy, for example, in the informal sector, are at risk of losing out if now big corporate players try to move into that space. So that's a discussion that's happening, and people becoming aware of this. Now, in terms of the other part of the question that you ask about consumers, so I think generally one of the big obstacles to creating a more circular system, which is also then based around concepts or principles of frugality or frugal innovation, is the approach of planned obsolescence. And a lot of business models and the products that are being produced are based on this principle. So that's, as we see, a big challenge, not only in terms of changing the actual products to make them more repairable or more enhanced durability, but in a way planned obsolescence also as a mindset and as an ingrained behavior that many consumers have been taught to practice. So that would be one of the big things that need to be addressed to make significant progress. I think I'll stop here. Thanks.
All right, Aarti?
Sorry. So yeah, I think let me just. I just wanted to go back to the earlier conversation about sort of scaling up and so changing this paradigm of what we have as waste today being sort of burnt or dumped. I mean, that's where it really starts, right? It has to start with the farmers understanding that they are burning money. And what not only is it creating all sorts of havoc with the climate, it is, they're literally losing out on revenue. So I think in terms of the sort of impact there, often you'll find households being, farmer households often, but not always being led by men. And that's why you sort of have to make an extra effort to make sure that how you go and train the women, sensitize the women that this is the type of residue we need on a regular basis to keep this gasification going, 22, 24 hours a day, however many days a week. You've got to make sure that in your sort of implementation, you're including that sort of outreach to the women, and then also in terms of how the biochar is applied. And it's not as simple as just here's an app on your phone. I mean, that will help. The technology will always help. Let us know when the waste is ready. We'll come and collect it when we need it. We'll pay you via the same app. You can then sort of start doing some gamification and say, oh, look, your farmer down the road, they've produced twice as much as you, what's going on? So there's sort of element of sort of peer-to-peer pressure you can also develop. But I think it really does need to start there. I think the second place we need to go to make this happen is governments. I think governments in Africa don't necessarily understand what gasification is, which is why I'm always saying it's not incineration, it's not combustion. And so there is a bit of an education that needs to happen there too. I think the last thing is, if you're drinking tea or coffee or eating chocolate, wherever you are around the world, be conscious of what you're consuming, and even ask. I mean, I think it is difficult in this part of the world to influence the price of these commodities. A lot of them are the prices are decided somewhere else. But if you, as a conscious consumer, don't want to drink tea that has been dried using wood, check the label. If it doesn't say it on the label, ask the brand, ask the producer. And I think that could also sort of start getting some conversations going.
Thomas, to bring you in with a joke, I assume your business model does not include planned obsolescence of these air purifiers.
Yeah, I like to joke that if the Chinese government wants to put me out of business by solving the air pollution problem, I would much rather be jobless in China and just breathe clean air and have no masks. I'm totally happy to do that. Besides, I have a day job, so that'll be fine. About the question of sort of equity and sort of who we're reaching, this is an interesting problem that we faced early on in the days of smart air. So you'd think with a very low cost purifier, so the market was at like $800, $1,000, and ours was 200 RMB, about $30 US. You'd think that instantly puts us into, the segments of society that most need this. But what we found was that a lot of people who were buying our air purifiers were in the big cities, Beijing, Shanghai, and oftentimes they were educated college students or recent grads and stuff like that. We found very, very early that when we would try to expand to other cities, so for example, Beijing is surrounded by lots of steel producing towns, Shijiazhuang and Xingtai. These are actually more polluted than Beijing because of the steel production. When we would try to go there, I remember in the early days we tried to host a workshop in a city in Hebei near Beijing, and the only people who showed up to this workshop were the people who were already in the cafe when we started. Nobody was interested, and we ran into this obstacle again and again and again. When we would try to go to second tier, third tier cities in China with very bad air pollution problems, people just weren't interested. People weren't buying it. People weren't coming to the workshop. People weren't interested. It showed us that the barrier is not just cost. Cost is definitely a barrier, But I think the other barrier is sort of awareness, interest, what my social network is talking about. And so even though we're providing this low-cost solution, there were a lot of parts of China and in other countries where people very much needed it, I think, from an objective standpoint, but from a subjective standpoint weren't interested. And so our solution, I feel very strongly that so we should not just try to saturate those markets and keep trying to host workshops in places where people clearly don't care. I think it's just a waste of our time. I think that it's not going to be successful. And instead, I think what we need to do is lean into the parts of the market that are responding, because poor college students also need clean air. It's not a waste to give college students clean air in China. And then for the parts of the market that aren't responding in the market, that's where we use other things. That's where we work with local organizations to get the word out. That's where we do donations. That's where we basically have sort of more of a charity model in the parts of the country where people aren't responding in the market, if that makes sense. So simply providing this low-cost purifier wasn't necessarily solving the problem of sort of equity. It wasn't getting it necessarily to the people that we thought objectively needed it the most. And so as a social enterprise, I think we have this sort of dual mission of, one is sort of this market-based solution, and the other one is more sort of charity and outreach.
Great, thanks, Thomas. Nii, how do you look at this in your area of work in terms of these market differentiations and different kinds of awareness and perceptions about the need for these more frugal products and services?
Yeah. You know, being an American, one of the things that I'm used to is just I was back in the States in December holiday timeframe, and I bought so many things on Amazon. I mean, just second nature. Just stock up, and then if you live in the West, you get what you need, right? And I don't worry about, because based on my income level, or whatever, I just one of the things that the average person here, they don't have the luxury of using e-commerce to just obtain that. Yes, there's e-commerce in Africa. We have in West Africa or in Ghana, we have Jumia, which is sort of the local version of Amazon, and people use that to buy things. I think within 2 or 3 weeks, you can get something that somebody in the West can get within 2 or 3 days. A lot of the stuff comes from Asia, mostly China, Malaysia. But if you're here, you're shopping e-commerce, you're of the elite, right? I'm wary of that. I think for frugal innovation, one of the things that people have to recognize, even though disposable income is rising, even though there is a growing, more equitable middle class in Ghana and other African countries, most people are still informal. Most people are still living within 2 or 3 generations of other family members, right? So if one has to design, if you're designing a product, or service, one has to look at how do you design a product that can withstand tropically tolerant conditions, and also, more than 1 or 2 people can use, right? And that's really, to me, there are people who are looking at that. I mean, I know some of the donors, people like GIZ and others, are looking at that. But now you have the private sector. There's quite a few entrepreneurs who are looking at servicing this market. They're looking at creating, products that can withstand tropically tolerant conditions, 1, but 2, that are frugal in nature, that are very basic, and it can solve whatever, right? Solve the whatever need. Somebody just told me the other day that a lot of females go through menstruation cycles and what have you, and there hasn't been enough innovations in that space because the average sanitary pad is just very expensive. So she's looking at how do you develop sustainable products for female care, and maternal care. As a male or a man, you don't think about these things. But if you're in a developed market where you don't have much disposable income, or if any, these are certain things you have to look at, right? So that's just to give you my take on it.
Michael, do you want to say something? Are there any questions from the comments from people who are commenting? Maybe there is something in here. Let's see. So there are some questions regarding. I think there are some comments regarding waste. We don't need more education. The producers know very well that they're producing one way since the 90s, and they don't pay cent to cleanups in the other countries. So I don't know if that has potential for discussion.
I'm seeing on the screen here where there was a question there just from Catherine for Aarti. I think that's a good question if Aarti wants to take that.
Sure. So I think thanks, Catherine, for the question. I think there isn't a sort of short answer to it because it would really depend on the community and how the community is organized, if they already have a cooperative, if they have funds in the cooperative, and what size of gasifier they're going to buy and what crops they have, et cetera, et cetera. So, however, I do think there's a fantastic investment opportunity. And when I say investment, that can be domestic investment, or it can be international. We don't mind where the money's coming from. But the point is that, agribusinesses don't necessarily want to purchase hardware, generators, generating power, whether it's heat, electricity, what isn't really their core business. So if there's a way of leasing out these machines to them over a certain period of time, we would build a model depending on what crops are in that community. So if it's in Kenya, for example, there are dozens and dozens of tea cooperatives, and they are all, burning wood today, as I keep saying. So we can then look at, how many flash dryers they need, and what sort of residue. And I will add that we do use technology which looks at how much crop production there will be, and out of that we can figure out what the residue will be. So and we can look at weather forecasts in advance to see what level of gasification we would need. So I know I'm not giving you a short answer, but I think it can absolutely invite investment, whether it's domestic or foreign or both, as long as people are ready to wait for returns. They won't come day one because once you've bought the machinery, you've then got to get the supply going. And then you start producing the biochar, and then you start getting increased productivity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But yes, I absolutely think that there's an opportunity here.
Yeah, I saw this question from Ludmila. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but this question is getting at, so where do we target ourselves? Which country, which region? How do we educate people? One of the things I found at Smart Air is, I think the most successful strategy that we found is basically to follow society, to follow the market. I'll give a couple examples. So I talked earlier about in China how if you just look at objective air pollution in different places, it was not a good predictor of where people were going to be interested in low-cost air purifiers. Instead, we basically just, the thing that worked the best was to put it up online and to see where demand was going, and then to lean into where the demand was already there and invest resources in there. It was, we had this temptation for us to decide who was the most needy, or who was the most, who could benefit from this the most. But we can't decide that. You can't just tell people what they need, and then expect them to act, right? Another example is when we moved to India. When we set up operations in India, what we found is all of a sudden in India, there was a huge demand for central air purification. So rather than just a standalone air purifier, a lot of buildings have like a central air system, and people wanted to install filters in those central air systems and then distribute it through the whole, house or apartment or office or whatever. And so we had to pivot and start supplying these sort of central air systems, which is a whole nother thing that we had to learn how to do and figure out the engineering behind that. But if we had been completely set on a single business model, we never would have discovered that in India. We only discovered it by being somewhat flexible and sort of seeing where the demand was, and then adjusting to that and leaning into that. So I think the key, at least for us, has been sort of flexibility, open-mindedness, and then leaning into what works, rather than to try to sort of force things onto to markets where people just aren't interested in the first place.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks very much, Thomas. I think Patrick wanted to say something very briefly on the comment that came through on Coca-Cola and the single-use plastics. 30 seconds, Patrick, because then we have to go back to Mike.
Yeah, sure, very briefly. So to tackle this issue of single-use plastics in general, I think so there's an important policy solutions that's being discussed all around the world, and this is extended producer responsibility. And through our research, we see that more and more countries are moving towards implementing, or in the first stage, designing and then implementing these policies. And this will be hopefully effective in addressing this issue. And it's also a way of financing solutions to this. And I would think there are opportunities also for frugal entrepreneurship to be financed and to have an opportunity as a result of such policies.